The year is 985 AD. Somewhere in the North Atlantic, a wooden vessel barely 20 meters long carries 30 men through darkness. The air temperature hovers near freezing. Waves crash over the gunwales, soaking everything aboard. There is no moon. The nearest land lies 400 kilometers away, and there is no cabin, no walls, no roof, no shelter of any kind. These men will remain exposed to the elements for the next 3 days. They will not light a fire. They will not retreat below deck. They will sleep in shifts in the open as salt spray freezes on their beards. This was not a desperate escape. This was standard procedure for the most successful naval civilization the medieval world ever produced. Consider the contradiction. The Vikings built ships capable of crossing the Atlantic 5 centuries before Columbus. They established colonies in Iceland, Greenland, and briefly in North America. Their maritime achievements remain among the most remarkable in human history. Yet they deliberately, consistently, and universally refused to build cabins on their ships. Every longship we have excavated confirms this. The Oseberg ship, recovered in 1904. The Gokstad ship, discovered in 1880. The 5 Skuldelev vessels, raised in 1962. All of them feature open decks with no permanent shelter structures, no heating systems, no enclosed sleeping quarters. The North Atlantic in autumn presents conditions that can kill an exposed human in hours: hypothermia, frostbite, exhaustion from constant shivering. Open boat ocean crossings should have been suicide. So how did they survive? More importantly, why did they choose this? The answer lies not in Viking toughness or primitive limitations. It lies in engineering. Calculated, sophisticated, ruthless engineering that sacrificed comfort entirely in pursuit of capability. Modern popular culture has constructed a specific image of Viking ships. Films depict enclosed captain's quarters. Video games show cooking fires burning below deck. Illustrations suggest sheltered sleeping areas where warriors could retreat from the elements. None of this is accurate. The archaeological record is unambiguous. Of approximately 30 well-preserved Viking ship remains, not a single one contains evidence of permanent cabin structures. No partition walls, no sleeping compartments, no hearth foundations. The Gokstad ship provides our most complete picture. Measuring over 23 meters in length, it demonstrates masterful clinker construction with overlapping planks riveted by iron nails. What it does not demonstrate is any concession to crew comfort. The deck is entirely open. There are no below-deck compartments. The design prioritizes 2 factors above all others: speed and stability in rough water. Written sources align with the physical evidence. The Icelandic sagas contain numerous detailed voyage accounts. The saga of Eric the Red describes colonization voyages to Greenland. The saga of the Greenlanders recounts the Vinland expeditions. In all these sources, there is no mention of crew retreating to cabins during storms, no references to enclosed sleeping quarters, no descriptions of shipboard heating. What we find instead are accounts of men enduring exposure, of crews huddling together, of voyages abandoned due to weather, of death from cold at sea. The evidence is not ambiguous. Viking ships were deliberately designed without cabins. This was not oversight, not technological limitation. It was engineering. To understand this choice, we must understand what made Viking ships exceptional. The longship represented a radical approach to naval architecture. Unlike heavier Mediterranean vessels, the longship prioritized extreme weight minimization. The Gokstad ship weighed approximately 2,000 kilograms when empty. For a vessel capable of carrying over 40 men across the ocean, this is extraordinarily light. A contemporary Byzantine dromon of similar length would have weighed 8 to 10 times as much. This weight reduction served 3 critical purposes. First, speed. The longship's shallow draft and light construction allowed speeds of up to 15 knots under sail, essential for tactical surprise during raids. Second, versatility. Lightweight meant navigation of shallow rivers that heavier vessels could not enter. The Vikings sailed up the Seine to Paris, up the Thames to London, deep into Russian river systems. Third, and most critically, portability. The Vikings regularly carried their ships overland. This practice, called portage, is documented extensively. The Varangian route from the Baltic to Constantinople required multiple portages between river systems. A cabin structure would have made portage impossible. Modern experimental archaeology has quantified this trade-off. The Roskilde Viking Ship Museum has constructed full-scale working replicas and tested them extensively. Even modest cabin structures adding 300 to 500 kilograms dramatically affect both sailing performance and overland transportability. That weight, positioned high on the hull, would raise the center of gravity significantly. In heavy seas, this would make the ship less stable, more prone to capsizing, slower to respond to helm corrections. The calculation was brutal. Cabin equals reduced speed, reduced stability. Eliminated portage capability. Cabin equals death by other means. There is a deeper engineering reason as well. The clinker construction that made these vessels remarkable also made them fundamentally incompatible with rigid internal divisions. In clinker building, hull planks overlap like fish scales. Each plank is riveted to the one below. The entire structure is designed to flex in response to wave action. This flexibility was the secret to the longship's seaworthiness. Rather than resisting heavy seas, the hull absorbed and redistributed force. A cabin would compromise this flexibility. Any permanent internal structure must be rigidly attached to the hull. Walls must meet at fixed angles. Roofs must be secured against movement. These rigid elements would create stress concentration points where normal hull flexing would be resisted, where forces would accumulate rather than dissipate. Modern finite element analysis of Skoldev 2 has demonstrated this effect. When researchers modeled cabin additions, simulations showed dramatically increased stress at attachment points. In heavy seas, these would lead to structural failure. The hull would literally tear itself apart. Modern viewers often wonder why Vikings did not build fires aboard their ships. Consider the construction. Viking ships were built entirely of wood, sealed with tarred wool. Sails were woolen fabric, waterproofed with animal fat. Ropes were hemp treated with pine tar. Everything aboard was extremely flammable. The ship was constantly moving, rolling, being struck by waves. Any fire would shift unpredictably. A single spark catching in tarred rigging could consume the vessel in minutes. There was no fire suppression technology. Once fire took hold, everyone aboard would die. The archaeological evidence confirms this prohibition. Excavated ships show no hearth structures, no fire-resistant areas, no ash deposits suggesting routine burning. The Vikings crossed the Atlantic cold. Understanding why they rejected cabins and fires only deepens the mystery. How did they survive? The answer lies in a comprehensive survival system, addressing every aspect of cold exposure through means other than permanent ship structures. The first line of defense was clothing. Archaeological evidence from Viking graves reveals sophisticated layered systems. Base layers of linen provided breathability and moisture wicking. Over this came woolen tunics, trousers, and hoods. Wool retains insulating capacity, even when wet. The fibers trap air, creating thermal resistance. Natural lanolin provides water resistance. For maritime use, outer layers were treated with animal fat or fish oil. Modern analysis shows these treatments reduced water absorption by up to 60% while preserving insulation. Experiments with reproduced Viking clothing demonstrate that properly layered wool maintains survivable body temperature, even in near-freezing conditions with high moisture exposure. While ships lacked permanent cabins, they carried temporary shelter equipment. The most important was the hudfat, a large skin tent deployable over part of the deck during rest periods. The Gokstad burial included wooden tent poles and heavy woolen fabric consistent with substantial temporary shelter. This shelter could be deployed and stowed quickly. It added no permanent weight. It did not compromise sailing performance. When conditions demanded all hands, it came down in minutes. When conditions allowed, Viking crews beached overnight rather than remaining at sea. They would go ashore, establish camp with proper fire, dry their clothing, and restore body temperature before continuing. This was not weakness. This was strategic planning. Perhaps the most remarkable technique was purely social. Viking crews slept in direct physical contact. This was systematic thermal engineering. A human body produces approximately 100 watts of heat. 30 bodies in close contact produce 3 kilowatts, enough to meaningfully raise temperature within a confined space like a skin tent. Modern Arctic survival protocols emphasize this same principle. The ship was a social organism. Survival was collective or not at all. Sea voyages were managed through strict watch rotations. At any time, only a portion of crew was working. The remainder rested, conserving energy, maintaining body temperature. Activity generates heat. By ensuring some crew were always active, the system maintained baseline metabolic heat production throughout the voyage. Finally, the Vikings approached survival through meticulous voyage planning. Ocean crossings were not undertaken casually. The primary Atlantic sailing season ran from May through September, aligning with calmer weather and longer daylight. Voyages were planned around known stopover points. The Norway to Iceland route included stops in the Shetland or Faroe Islands for recovery and resupply. Crews might wait weeks for optimal conditions. This was not impatience overcome by courage. This was engineering discipline expressed through operational planning. The Roskilde Viking Ship Museum has tested these systems extensively. Their replica Havingsten for Glendalau completed multiple long-distance voyages using reconstructed clothing, temporary shelters, and traditional techniques. Crews reported the wool system remarkably effective, even with repeated wave exposure. The Hoodfat shelter created meaningfully warmer conditions than open exposure. Physical closeness was described as socially challenging but thermally essential. Sleep was fragmented. Comfort was non-existent, but survival was achieved. We can now see Viking ship design for what it truly was. Not primitive limitation, not cultural indifference to suffering. It was strategic calculation. On one side, cabin structures providing shelter but adding weight, raising center of gravity, compromising flexibility, eliminating portage capability, reducing speed. On the other side, open design exposing crews to elements but preserving speed, stability, versatility, structural integrity. The Vikings chose capability over comfort. They made this choice consistently across centuries, across thousands of ships. The ocean did not permit half measures. There is something deeply uncomfortable about this approach. It offends modern sensibilities. We live in a world where technology exists primarily to shield us from environmental challenge, where suffering is a problem to be engineered away. The Vikings understood that capability and comfort exist in tension. The ship that shelters you may also slow you, sink you, trap you. Survival sometimes requires accepting hardship rather than hiding from it. The open deck meant everyone aboard shared identical conditions. The captain suffered the same cold as the newest crew member. There was no privilege of shelter, no escape from common fate. This enforced equality may have been the most important survival feature of all. When conditions become unbearable for everyone, the only solution is cooperation. The open deck made survival a collective problem with only collective solutions. The social bonds required to share body heat, maintain watch rotations, trust shipmates with your life. These bonds were forged by shared suffering. A cabin would have broken that bond. It would have created hierarchy. Officers below, crew above. The social cohesion that made survival possible would have fractured along cabin walls. They crossed the coldest oceans the medieval world knew. They reached lands no European had seen before. They built a maritime civilization stretching from Constantinople to Newfoundland. And they did it cold. wet, exposed, not because they had no choice, because they understood the choice. They did not simply endure the elements through strength alone. They redesigned every aspect of life around the constraints their engineering demanded. The clothing, the shelter systems, the social organization, the voyage planning, all of it flowed from the decision to keep the deck open. That is the dark side of Viking ship design. And that is why they did not build cabins.